Coming up on Primetime News, as Korea marks its 67th Constitution Day, the National Assembly Speaker calls for a push toward amending the Constitution and proposes inter-Korean parliamentary talks. But the talks that the two Koreas did hold for the first time in more than a year over a wage dispute at the joint Kaesong Industrial Complex end in failure. Plus, Samsung Group's founding family scores a big win over U.S. hedge fund Elliott Associates as shareholders vote in favor of the merger of two Samsung affiliates. Stay tuned for these stories and more. Hello and welcome to Primetime News on this Friday, July 17th. I'm Hwang Ji-hye.
And I'm Daniel Choy. Thank you for joining us. Today is a historic day for Korea, the 67th Constitution Day, Korea's National Assembly Speaker called for the start of discussions to amend the Constitution.
And that's not all. Chung Ui-hwa also proposed inter-Korean parliamentary talks. Our Kim Young-gil starts us off.
In his congratulatory speech, Assembly Speaker Chung Ui-hwa stressed the need for a constitutional amendment for the sake of national unity and to better protect the rights of the people.
Although the actual constitutional amendment may take place during the 20th National Assembly term, we must start discussions now.
Chung said because the last revision was in 1987, the time had come to amend the Constitution. He added that South Korea needed an updated constitution relevant to the current times which could facilitate the implementation of national tasks to fulfill the country's vision of the future. The legislative chief also proposed talks with North Korea's Assembly Speaker, emphasizing the importance of the legislative body's role in contributing to peace on the Korean peninsula.
If the South and North parliamentary speakers are able to hold talks accompanied by other parliamentarians, this would help ease tensions on the Korean peninsula.
Chung said he feels the upcoming period around August 15th is a golden time for talks, as it marks the 70th anniversary of Korea's independence from Japan's colonial rule. He also urged Seoul and Pyongyang to continuously broaden humanitarian exchanges as a way to build trust between the two divided countries. South Korea's Assembly Speaker Chung Ui-hwa expressed his willingness to meet with his North Korean counterpart at any time and any place should the North accept the offer. Kim Young-gil, Arirang News.
After President Park Geun-hye ended a weeks-long impasse with the ruling Saenuri Party this week, high-level officials from her office, the government, and the party have agreed to reopen their consultative channel next Wednesday. This was confirmed by the ruling party's floor leader Won Yu-chul. He said getting the parliamentary approval of the government's supplementary budget bill by July 23rd will be the meeting's top agenda. Dialogue between the top office, government, and ruling party was severed over a controversy centering around a bill of revisions to the National Assembly law. Now, Korea's rival parties agreed today to begin a probe into the nation's spy agency as early as the end of this month. They plan to meet again next Monday to finalize the list of participants and which departments to visit at the National Intelligence Service. The opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy demands to include a separate IT expert for the investigation, but the ruling party says there's no need to do so when lawmaker An Chol-soo, the founder of Anlab, the country's biggest antivirus software company, can come along. Allegations recently surfaced that the NIS bought spying software from an Italian tech firm in 2012 to spy on people ahead of the presidential election. Moving on to the latest developments on the MERS outbreak in Korea, the foreign virus attack that shook the nation early this summer is now showing clear signs of abating, with no new cases reported over the last 12 days. More than 100 suspected patients were the latest to be released from quarantine. The government is expected to declare an end to the outbreak as early as next month if no further cases are confirmed. Meanwhile, Samsung Medical Center in Seoul, considered the center of MERS transmissions, is expected to end its partial shutdown and resume full operations from next Monday. A group of Japanese journalists has paid a visit to a shelter for elderly Korean women who were forced into sex slavery for Japanese troops during World War II. Their visit marks the first of its type. Son Jung-in has more.
A documentary on the Korean victims of Japan's wartime system of sexual slavery is being shown, and the visitors' eyes are fixed on the screen. They are Japanese journalists from 16 Japan-based media firms who paid a visit to the House of Sharing in Gwangju, Gyeonggi-do Province, which provides shelter for former Korean sex slaves. The reporters said they wanted to meet the women in person and listen to their testimonies in an objective manner to find a way toward historical reconciliation between Korea and Japan. The elderly victims sitting face-to-face with the journalists could not contain the resentment they have felt for so many years.
All we ask for is a sincere apology from Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe and for him to restore our honor. We don't understand why this is so hard for him when we have dedicated our lives for justice.
The journalists asked the victims for their opinion on the Asian Women's Fund, which was raised from Japan's private sector in 1995 to compensate the survivors. The victims maintained that the Japanese government must itself provide compensation.
We hope the journalists clearly convey the victims' sad history so the two sides can work together to resolve this issue.
The victims asked the journalists to act as mediators to urge the Japanese government to acknowledge state responsibility for its historical wrongdoings. The timing of the visit is significant as it comes ahead of the 70th anniversary of Korea's independence from Japanese colonial rule and the 70th anniversary of Japan's surrender in World War II. Only 48 victims remain alive in Korea. Son Jung-in, Arirang News.
Let's talk inter-Korean relations now. Multiple rounds of talks were held late into the night between government officials from the two Koreas to hammer out some kind of a solution in the minimum wage crisis for North Korean workers at their joint industrial park. Unfortunately, the two sides failed to reach a compromise. Our Kim Hyun-bin tells us more.
The two Koreas held rare government-level talks on Thursday aimed at resolving a long-standing wage hike dispute at the InterKorea Kaesong Industrial Complex, but were unable to narrow their differences. Soon after the talks, North Korea's Vice Director of Special Economic Zone Development, Park Chol-soo, emphasized there is no need for this kind of negotiation in the future, labeling it a waste of time. The two sides were locked in 4 rounds of talks but failed to come to any sort of compromise.
The South presented plans designed to normalize operations at the complex, while the North focused only on the wage hike issue, so we weren't able to come to a consensus.
These were the first government-level talks between the two Koreas since June last year. In February, Pyongyang unilaterally raised the minimum monthly wage for North Korean workers by around 5% to $74. Seoul rejected the move, calling it a breach of a 2004 agreement stipulating that the two sides set wages together. In late May, the North accepted the South's tentative offer to pay wages at the current amount of slightly over $70, buying time to resolve the issue. The two sides also failed to set a date for the next meeting. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
Staying on the topic of inter-Korean relations, the economic gap between the two Koreas continued to widen, with the South's gross national income per capita standing at more than 21 times larger than that of the North's last year. The Bank of Korea says South Korea's GNI per capita stood at almost $26,000, while North Korea's came in at around $1,200. The central bank also estimates Pyongyang's GDP to have grown by 1% last year. That's down from 1.1% growth in the previous year, as some of its main industries, such as agriculture and manufacturing, failed to repeat previous output. An annual international security dialogue hosted by South Korea is set to take place this September. And for the first time since it kicked off 3 years ago, Seoul has invited Pyongyang to attend that meeting. Our Na Yeon-kyung has this report.
South Korea has invited North Korea to its annual Seoul Defense Dialogue, or SDD, slated to take place in September. This is the first time the South has invited the North since the dialogue began in 2012. This year, some 250 defense officials from around the world, including the U.S., China, and Russia, are expected to take part. Seoul's defense ministry said Friday that it sent a telegram this morning inviting the vice ministerial level figure of North Korea's Ministry of People's Security. Since the SDD discusses security and defense issues, in particular those regarding the Asia-Pacific region, South Korea says it's natural to have North Korea attend the dialogue. However, due to continuous frictions in inter-Korean relations, Seoul cannot invite Pyongyang to the first 3 installments of the forum. But pundits are not too hopeful about North Korea's participation, as it has already rejected a proposal of inter-Korean dialogue earlier in the year and also put South Korea's invitation to a non-political event slated for October on hold. With North Korea expected to carry out a 4th nuclear test sometime soon, attention lies on whether the regime will decide to come to Seoul in September. If it does, it will be the first encounter for the two Korea's military officials since a meeting took place at the truce village of Panmunjom in October last year. 나현경, Arirang News.
U.S. hedge fund Elliott Associates has failed in its attempts to throw a spanner in the works of Samsung Group's restructuring. Shareholders approved the merger of 2 Samsung affiliates today, a move that will solidify the power of the conglomerate's heir apparent Lee Jae-yong. Kim Min-ji has the details.
The decision is out. Shareholders of Samsung C&T have given the green light on a controversial $8 billion takeover by JL Industries, Samsung's de facto holding company. The deal was approved by over 69% of votes in favor, more than the 2/3 of participants that was required.
It seems like Samsung's efforts to win over shareholders worked, going as far as mobilizing thousands of its employees to visit individual shareholders in person ahead of the meeting.
Shareholders of JL Industries unanimously voted yes to the proposed merger at their own meeting on Friday.
This now puts Lee Jae-yong, the only son of Samsung Group chairman Lee Gun-hee, in a much stronger position at the conglomerate as he seeks to consolidate his power. Once the merger is complete, he will be the biggest shareholder with 16.5% stake of the new entity.
The approval also marks a victory against U.S. hedge fund Elliott Associates. The third largest stakeholder in Samsung C&T had been trying to block the merger, arguing that the deal was unfair as it undervalues the construction unit.
We have to wait and see now. Elliott may continue to pressure Samsung, and it may decide to accept the result and be satisfied with the rise in share prices now.
The Samsung affiliates say the merged entity, which will be named Samsung C&T, will boast a revenue of about $60 billion by 2020. The merger is scheduled for September. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Korea's top automaker Hyundai Motor Group's design has been leaked to China to shell out new cars there. The financial damage to the group is expected to run into the tens of millions of dollars. Shin Se-min has the details.
Hyundai Motor Group is involved in what qualifies as a case of industrial espionage, with one of its automobile designs leaked to a Chinese company. A former employee of one of the group's subcontracting firms is being investigated on allegations that he had stolen and used auto designs and confidential business information from Hyundai Motor Group after leaving the firm. Some of the 200 classified business documents included strategies and designs for unreleased vehicles.
The design blueprint has been used to sketch the exterior, body, and the motion of the vehicle, allowing them to easily come up with their final product.
Another design service company has also been guilty of similar practices. The representative of a Korean outsourcing company has posted Hyundai Motor Group's business information on the company's computer network, illegally sharing confidential information with those doing business with Chinese firms. Normally, the subcontractors must delete all related information upon completion of the order. Prosecutors have so far arrested 22 who had been involved in unlawful sharing and theft of information. Prosecutors say that while the investigation is ongoing, they estimated the financial damage from the leakage to be over 70 billion won, or $61 million, since the information was first exposed last year. 신세민, Arirang News.
Innovation centers that help startups launch their businesses are the core momentum drivers for realizing President Park Geun-hye's creative economy. The headquarters for connecting the regional centers opened here in Seoul on Friday. For more on this story, let's turn to our Song Ji-sun.
Without doubt, Seoul serves as a great incubator with one of the best environments for startups. It is home to 1 out of 5 startups here in Korea, and startup support centers are operated on campus at 38 universities, which allows students the opportunity to launch their businesses directly from their classrooms. The launch of the Google campus in Seoul, the first of its kind in Asia, is proof of the interest from the private sector in its potential. Seoul's Innovation Center will be headquartered at this facility called Dream Enter, which opened its doors last year and is actively supporting startups. The Seoul Center also offers enough space to accommodate 40 startups and will hold joint global demo days to help them exhibit their business models, which will also be open to startups launched in other regions.
Interactions between regional innovation centers is increasing as the nationwide network is almost complete. The Seoul Center aims to share its vast resources of experts and technologies, especially in the private sector here in the capital, with the regional centers.
CJ, a conglomerate powerful in the entertainment and culture industries, will also provide its global network to startups seeking to expand overseas. The final phase for opening innovation centers will conclude in Incheon later this month, completing the network of 17 branches nationwide. Song Ji-sun, Arirang News.
The curtain is up for one of Korea's most glamorous events of the year, the Puchong International Fantastic Film Festival. Our Kim Ji-yeon helps us take a sneak peek at the 19th edition of BFUN, which provides the usual mix of fantasy and horror movies and a chance to see some big-name stars in the flesh.
Love, mystery, and adventure perfectly sums up the films at this year's Puchong International Fantastic Film Festival. During the 11-day event, 235 films from 45 countries will be featured, ready to captivate the audience. The festival, also known as BFUN, is all about genre films with a focus on fantasy and horror.
Horror, sci-fi, fantasy, action, you name it. They're all here to chase away the summer heat.
The opening film is Moonwalkers by famous French director Antoine Bardu-Jacquet. The film incorporates a novel view when portraying the hopes and dreams of young protagonists who go back in time. Other films to look out for include John McClane's Western movie Slow West and Sion Sono's The Chasing World, a story about a group of schoolgirls that go into a mysterious forest. The closing piece is The Chosen Forbidden Cave by Korean director Kim Hee, who produced The Neighbors that performed very well at the Korean box office in summer of 2012. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
And for today's top international headlines, we are now joined by Lee Sun-ho at the News Center.
Our focus today, the German parliament approves new Greece bailout talks. A Tennessee gunman shoots and kills 4 military officers, and a new footage has been revealed on the one-year anniversary of the downed Malaysian Airlines MH17.
First, Sun-ho, let's turn to Europe with new developments on the Greece debt crisis.
Well, the debt debate headed over to the German parliament on Friday as lawmakers decided on a crucial vote in favor of negotiations for a third bailout package for Greece. 439 lawmakers voted in favor of the bill, with 119 against it and 40 abstaining. In an opening statement on Friday, Chancellor Angela Merkel urged German lawmakers to back the negotiations, saying that the alternatives would be chaos in Europe. Later during the day, the Vice-Chancellor voiced his support for the package, crushing any discussions about Greece leaving the Eurozone.
For us in Germany, this means that every debate about a Grexit must now belong to the past. No mourning, No more mourning about the past, no finger pointing, no accusations, and no return to the game of Greece leaving the Eurozone.
Now, they weren't the only ones in support of the deal, as shown by Germany's finance minister, who said he also backed the measures, asking lawmakers to do the same. Now, Germany was the last European country to approve the bill after Austria gave its consent earlier on Friday. In the meantime, the European Central Bank increased its emergency funding to stop Greece's banks from failing. Now, this means measures will help Greek banks reopen on Monday, which have been closed for almost 3 weeks now. After a deadly shooting by a gunman in Tennessee, resulting in 4 Marines dead, officials are now scrambling to figure out just exactly what motivated him to carry out such a heinous act. Authorities said the incident might be an act of domestic terrorism, as there was no evidence that he had any connections with terrorists outside the country.
We are just beginning this investigation. We will explore that option. But at this point, we don't have anything that directly ties him to an international terrorist organization.
The shooter was identified as 24-year-old Mohammed Yusuf Abdulaziz, a naturalized U.S. citizen who was born in Kuwait. He was seen driving around a Ford Mustang, heading first to a military recruiting center where he fired his weapon inside. He then drove to a Naval Reserve Center a few miles away, killing 4 Marines, before he himself was fatally wounded by police during the shootout. 3 more were injured in the attacks, including 1 police officer and 1 Marine who are reportedly in stable condition. The incident took place at around 10:45 a.m. on Thursday and was over after about 30 minutes. It's been 1 year since Malaysia Airlines flight MH17 was tragically shot down while flying over eastern Ukraine. New footage has been revealed of the crash, while countries paid tribute to the victims by holding memorials. Now, the footage that you see was obtained by the News Corp Australian media company, and it shows what appears to be the aftermath of the downed plane. The company said that separatist rebels filmed the scenes on site as they realized that this was not a Ukrainian fighter jet, but a commercial plane. Just prior to this, they fired a ground-to-air missile at the aircraft. Now, to mark the first anniversary of the tragedy, many memorials took place around the world to remember the victims. For instance, members of the Ukrainian parliament placed flowers at the Dutch embassy in Kiev.
I would like to express my heartfelt gratitude for the love and compassion that the Ukrainian people and the Ukrainian parliament have shown over the whole year, but also in particular today.
And heading over to the Australian capital city of Canberra, another memorial service took place to pay tribute to the 39 Australian passengers who lost their lives on the Malaysia Airlines flight. The plane was shot down on July 17, 2014, killing all 298 passengers on board in the midst of a major conflict in eastern Ukraine between government troops and pro-Russian separatist rebels. And that does it for your international news update today. I'll see you again on Monday.
The capital, Seoul, and most of the inland regions were not affected by Typhoon Nangka today. In fact, conditions were rather warm and partly sunny. And as for Nangka, it has been downgraded to a tropical storm, and it should dissipate by tomorrow afternoon. And nevertheless, typhoon and high seas advisories will remain in effect until tomorrow across the southeastern coastal areas. And weather conditions over the weekend should be similar to today, with highs staying in the upper 20s for Saturday, but will be slightly cooler on Sunday with a chance of sporadic showers before noon. So keep that in mind if you are planning on going out on Sunday morning. Now, taking a closer look at tomorrow's temperature, Seoul and Gwangju will get up to 29, while Daegu and Busan will have highs of 28 and 25. And as for the other regions, it seems like Daejeon and Jeju Island will see a high of 29 and 27, while Dokdo tops out at 23. Now, although we're still in the monsoon seasons, the capital area is yet to see a good amount of rain for the time being. Well, that's all for me this week. Have a wonderful weekend.
Well, if you want to talk about nostalgia, present tense, past perfect, according to some who wish to live in the past.
Not unless you make valuable deposits on your memory bank every day.
That's right. Well, that brings us to the end of our newscast. Thank you so much for staying with us.
And have a great weekend. We'll see you back on Monday, same time. Goodbye for now.